right! Thank God it's fantasy football season. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is called Redemption Rehab. And if you tuned in today, it's because you want to get better at one thing, and that's fantasy football. Today, we're talking about some of my top picks and some of my sleeper picks that'll help you get the job done. So let's take a look at position players like tight ends. So let's hit the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are. Today, we're talking about some of my top picks at tight end and some of my sleeper picks at tight end to help you in the 2019 fantasy football season. And when you get a chance, you should go back and listen to my tight end strategy video that I recorded earlier. That video will give you more information than just who my top picks are. In that video, we talk draft strategy, we talk about tight ends who are coming into the league and have come in the league over the last few years. You should always know who's coming into the league at every position, but today we're talking tight end. So let's head over to Fantasy Football Calculator and check out who my top picks are and some of my sleepers for tight ends in 2010. Okay, here we are on Fantasy Football Calculator's draft board, and we're talking about my top picks at tight end. When you look at this screen behind me, you'll see that tight ends are in sort of a yellow or tan color. I'll click on the names when I'm talking about it, like I will with Travis Kelce, and you can see behind me how they turn black. Travis Kelce normally will be the first pick as a tight end off the board. He's going a little earlier than I will take a tight end. I usually never take a tight end prior to round 3. So I already know, unless he falls to round 3, I'm not taking him. The other tight end you should be looking at is George Kittle from San Francisco, Zach Ertz over here from Philadelphia in the 3rd round. So let's take a look at these tight ends as we see on the screen behind me. Travis Kelce is clearly the number 1 tight end, followed by George Kittle and Zach Ertz. I usually like to have my running backs and wide receivers in these rounds, so I rarely get these guys, but if you decide to pull the trigger on them, it's a good idea. Let's take a look at some of the other tight ends that follow these guys in rounds 5 and 6 that may fit the bill for you in your draft. Okay, the next tight end you can see here in round 5 is O.J. Howard. He's down in Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay's got to throw the ball a lot, so he's a good pick in round 5. I can't deny that. He's definitely on my radar as someone I'd like to have, even though he hasn't proven a lot yet, mostly because of injuries. The other tight end I'd like to show you here is Evan Ingram. This guy's probably going to have a breakout year. Once the Giants traded Odell Beckham to Cleveland, I think that you'll see that Evan Ingram probably will be one of the top 3 tight ends in the league, and I would be targeting him if I was you at the end of round 5 or the beginning of round 6. I think he's in for a huge year. And the last tight end that I want to show you on this as my top picks is Hunter Henry. He's here in the middle of round 6. He's playing for San Diego. He's also coming back from injury last year. He's a good tight end, but when he's healthy, I think that you'll see him catch a lot of touchdowns and a lot of passes for Phillip Rivers in 2019. These are some of my top picks. There's only 6 here, and that's it. That's my tier 1 and 2 tight ends. I'll show you my sleeper tight ends and other tight ends that I think that will do good. But if I don't get one of these 6 at a price I'm willing to pay, then I'm going to wait on tight end, and I suggest you do too, and I'll show you just who you should be targeting if that's the case. Okay, we're going to talk about some of my sleeper picks that I like in 2019, and it starts over here in round 9 with David Njoku from the Cleveland Browns. He hasn't got a chance to play in the preseason, so he's been slipping a lot. I think round 9 is fair for him. I would highly suggest, if you get a chance, to get a share or 2 of David Njoku. I think you'll be happy. I don't think he'll produce double digits every week, but I think you can count on him for a solid season. So if you want to get a share or two of him, I would suggest it. And another guy that I kind of like a lot that had a good year last year was Austin Hooper. If you're not willing to wait past round 10 before you get a tight end, and sometimes I get one of these two just so I have a lot of them to compete against each other. So Austin Hooper is another guy I like. He's down there in Atlanta. Matt Ryan threw to him a lot last year. I know he didn't start half the games, but he still had a good season. So he might be someone worth taking a look at in rounds 10 or 11, especially if he falls even further. But let me give you some names that aren't popular. I rarely take a rookie tight end. And if you watch my video, Draft Strategy on Tight Ends, you'll see why. I explain in depth why rookie tight ends usually don't have a good first season. But this year, with several tight ends going in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft, I think you should be paying close attention to TJ Hawkinson. Here he is over here in round 12. I definitely plan on having some shares of him because I believe Detroit's going to utilize him not only at tight end, but maybe in the slot or out at wide receiver, because not only can he block, which is what a tight end should be able to do, but he can also catch the ball and he'll be a huge red zone target. So I see TJ Hawkinson as probably one of the rookies I would consider taking at tight end, even though I rarely do it. I would imagine he'll be just about on every one of my teams, especially if he falls to round 11 or 12. When we come back, I'll give you a list of deep sleepers that didn't even make this draft board. We are talking about some of our deep sleepers. Let me give you some that are on this chart that may help you in case you don't want to take my advice and take some of these guys that didn't make this draft board. Delanie Walker right here in Tennessee, if he stays healthy for 16 games, he's really going to help your team out a lot. Another player is Kyle Rudolph from Minnesota. I think you can count on him for a solid outing each week. He's got a rookie tight end behind him that they drafted, Irv Smith, and he might be worth some consideration if something happens to Kyle Rudolph. I would definitely be picking up Irv Smith on the waiver wire if something happens to Kyle Rudolph. And the last one on this board that I'm going to mention to you is over here is Trey Burton. If you get a chance to pick up Trey Burton late in the draft, he's a Chicago tight end that I think you'll see Trubisky throwing the ball to on a regular basis. He went there last year as a free agent and didn't have a good year. Let me give you some names of some deep sleepers that you should know about going into the 2019 Fantasy Football League draft. One of my favorite players that I plan on having on a lot of teams is a tight end who is a backup to Zach Ertz, and his name is Dallas Goedert. But I still think that he might be on just about every team I draft because I still think he's going to get a lot of playing time, and he's very good. Other tight ends that I like a lot are Chris Herndon from the New York Jets. Now, he's suspended for 4 games, so you might be able to pick him up on the waiver wire after the draft. I would highly consider him because he's a second-year player that should have a good year this year once he comes back from suspension. But I doubt he'll be drafted in any league, so you could probably get him on the waiver wire in weeks 2 or 3. 2 or 3 other tight ends I'd keep an eye on. Tyler Eifert, if he comes back healthy for the Cincinnati Bengals, has always been a good player. He just can hardly stay healthy. He's got a teammate. His name is CJ Uzomah, who is also a very good player. He came into camp in shape, and I think you'll see maybe him compete for a lot of catches without AJ Green down there in Cincinnati. And the last guy I want you to keep an eye on, and he's a real deep sleeper. You could probably get him on the waiver wire, so keep an eye out for him. His name is Mike Gesicki. He's a tight end down there in Miami. Miami's going to struggle this year, but I think somewhere during the year, you may start to hear the name Mike Gesicki. He's a second-year player out of Penn State, and I think once he starts to get his footing in the NFL, he'll be a good tight end. Okay, in summary, if you find yourself without a tight end of one of those 6 tight ends that I mentioned earlier, then you're looking at taking tight ends later in the draft. If you do this, I would take at least 2 or 3 and let them compete against each other. I gave you a whole list of tight ends that I think will have a good year this year, and you should be taking some of those. If you wait till later in the draft, make sure you get at least 3 of them because they can compete against each other. And if none of those work out, I gave you some names of some people that you can find on the waiver wire that should help you compete for a championship in 2019. I'm Buster Brown. The show's Redemption Rehab. Good luck.